Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. Can you believe that we're already in the release month for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom? That game comes out at the end of this month, and my guest today got her hands on that title, as well as a few other upcoming Switch games. You know her as the editor-in-chief of But Why Tho, but I know her as one of my favorite people to run into randomly at game events. It is the one and only Kate Sánchez. Kate, how are you?
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to record a podcast with you. It's been a hot minute since we have.
I want to say it was, because I think we were talking Forza Horizon 5 the last time we were on. So that was like 3 years ago?
Oh, God, yeah.
Something like that. And I was on the Game Informer show. But yeah, extremely happy to have you on here. The last time we got to actually hang out was for the Star Wars Outlaws preview event.
Mm-hmm.
So that was,
was
about 2 months ago. Very fun event, very an exciting time because, like, I don't know, I was just like ready to play more Star Wars Outlaws because I'd flown to Sweden a few months prior to do our cover story, and it was awesome to like just be like, oh, Kate, cool, and we're just sitting there like eating in the backyard of this, the back patio of this cool event space that Ubisoft rented out. But yeah. It's awesome to finally have you on All Things Nintendo and to be able to do another podcast with you. So
I'm excited.
We have a tradition on All Things Nintendo for debuting guests, and that is we get to know them a little bit through the lens of their history with Nintendo. So I'm going to ask you 2 questions, pretty baseline stuff. The first one is, what was your first Nintendo game, first Nintendo system, or first Nintendo memory?
So, funny thing, I did not own a Nintendo system until the Wii. I went to my friend's house to play video games very often, and or my cousins. That being said, my first Nintendo memory and the first game that I got my hands on was Mortal Kombat, because my cousins had, I don't know what system it was, but they had an early Nintendo that the first Mortal Kombat was on.
Oh, that was Super Nintendo, yeah.
So they had a Super Nintendo. My cousin was very good at fighting games, and he was the reason why I kind of got into fighting games myself. And I just remember sitting there and getting in trouble because I would get so excited that I would start trying to like maybe replicate some flips and moves and may have hurt myself once or twice. But it was, Mortal Kombat was the first time I ever got to play Nintendo myself. And then I would say for something that I owned, I used to have Rock Band on the Wii, and my dad would play with us. He loved playing the drums. So I would sing, my dad would play drums, and my little brother would do the guitar. So.
Well, now you're talking my language, because Rock Band is one of my favorite games of all time, particularly Rock Band 2, if you have to like narrow it down. But it's a platform, so like you have to like
It's
just take
so
into account the
good.
entire franchise. Yeah, that was the game that I've spent the most money on in my life because I bought thousands of DLC songs. I still play it every once in a while. I also have friends over to play Rock Band. Had several folks, former Game Informer folks, over in this very basement right behind us. But yeah, Rock Band, one of my favorite video games ever. So that's an interesting one. We have not had those 2 games as the first Nintendo games on this show yet. We're 152 episodes in. Not a single mention of those as the first Nintendo games, but I respect it. So that brings us to the second part, which is, what is your favorite Nintendo game of all time?
This one was very, very hard for me to think about. And it may also be a game that you have not had somebody mention. So the Nintendo systems that, like, it's funny you asked me on this podcast because your girl is catching up on everything that I have missed from Nintendo. Because I only had, actually no, the Wii wasn't my first system. It was the GameCube.
Okay.
GameCube was my first system. I forgot that cute little thing. That being said, I think my favorite Nintendo game, and it wasn't published by Nintendo, but it was a game that I got for $5 at a Sam's. I think it's PN03. She had a like spacesuit type thing on with little wings on the back, and she would dance in between her moves.
It's a Capcom game.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I think it's hard, like, when I get asked to talk about Nintendo because I did play like I think Kirby's Air Ride was on the GameCube. That's my brother learned math. Was because of that game. I played that generation of like Mario and Kirby games, but I think the game that like that GameCube that defined the GameCube for me, and that I kept playing over and over. And that if you ask me right now, Kate, if I could give you your favorite Nintendo system, which is the GameCube, and you could have one game on that GameCube, that would be the game that I chose.
So
And
it looks like
it's
the name is actually Project Number 3. The Piano
there we
3 is like a
go.
stylization, but
Okay, Project Number
directed
Three.
by Shinji Mikami,
I
so
didn't know that.
creator of Resident Evil.
This explains so much about my life's trajectory.
Those
Um,
formative years.
yeah, very, very formative. Sorry, it's not like a Mario or a Zelda
No,
or
that makes it
a
more interesting. I just don't have anything to
Metroid.
contribute because I've never played this game before, but I trust you that it's very good. And then it was produced by Hiroyuki Kobayashi, who was
Wow.
also somebody who worked on the Devil May Cry and Resident Evil games.
Wow. This explains. Okay. I never looked it up, Brian. Like, I have never looked up who made it. I have just let it be this very, very fond memory. But seeing as Devil May Cry and Resident Evil are two of my favorite franchises, yeah, the next thing you'll say is that, like, the composer from Bayonetta was on it or
Oh, well, now I
something.
have to look up the
But,
composer.
and you would have had the Kate trifecta of things that established me as a gaming human.
I don't recognize the composer names.
Okay.
Shusaku Uchiyama and Makoto Tomozawa. So
Okay.
I don't recognize those names in terms of like
Yeah.
work that they may have done elsewhere. But I mean, hey, that's already a good start for personnel on a game.
Entirely. Okay. I don't feel as weird about my pick anymore because I have always felt weird that because I've been asked this question before and it hasn't changed. And I was like, well, I'm going on a Nintendo podcast. Maybe I should like try to change it. But then I was like, nah, Brian's cool.
Yeah, we appreciate the hipster pick. And you live in Austin, that's
Oh my God.
that's
Am
the
I a
hipster
Nintendo
haven.
hipster?
Hey, as a former person who lived in Austin, I can also get down with the hipster pick. I'll go thrifting with you on SoCo or something one day,
Oh
and
my gosh. Oh, I did not expect to have my identity defined as a Nintendo hipster.
you're a Nintendo hipster,
I am a Nintendo hipster, proud
and
Nintendo
and
hipster
we are
here.
here for it. Before we jump into the news, I just want to send out a reminder that you can support the All Things Nintendo podcast through a variety of ways. The biggest and best is the Patreon page, where you can come in at the $5 or $10 level. That unlocks perks like early and ad-free episodes, as well as an entirely separate weekly podcast called All Things Gamers, which covers the entire games industry. Also get access to the All Things Nintendo community Discord, where we have some of the best people over there chatting about all of our favorite hobby. Another way you can help is by checking out the official All Things Nintendo merchandise store on tpublic.com. Look for the link in the description to the show, and also subscribe to the YouTube channel, where I put up full video versions of this very podcast. All right, Kate, we have a few news stories to get to. We're going to be talking about your trip to PAX West in the main segment of this show. But first, a few news stories to kind of just like see what's going on in the world of Nintendo. And we have a leadership change on the Nintendo side of things. But when we talk about Nintendo leadership here on All Things Nintendo, I feel like it's either Nintendo of America or Nintendo of Japan. But today we actually have some news out of Nintendo of Europe. Not a whole lot of
Wow.
news on the executive side over there usually. But
Yeah.
Stefan Boll, I believe that's how you pronounce it, has announced that he's stepping down after 6 years in the role of president of Nintendo of Europe. And after 35 years total at Nintendo, he's retiring from full-time work, at least, is how it was said. Luciano Pereira will take over as president and CEO of Nintendo of Europe. Meanwhile, Laurent Fischer is the new COO, and Tom Inoue is the new senior managing director. And Kate, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea how this will impact the company, since I mostly cover NOA and NCL. But I
Yeah.
hope it means continued success, because this generation has been very good to like not only Nintendo, but also fans of the company.
Yeah, I think like one of the interesting things for me whenever I hear about somebody retiring or moving on from Nintendo is always that entire year number. It's something, especially in this industry, and I work in hiring, like my 9 to 5, like seeing a company that has hired people to retire them, like 35-year career. There's something that I don't know makes me like happy, I guess.
Yeah.
So I have nothing to contribute on the front of what will happen, but I will say that that has always been intriguing to me because I think that even not even just in gaming, but like in the industry in general, in any industry in general, it is getting harder and harder to have tenures that are that long. So
Yeah, I've said several times how frustrated I am that Game Informer was closed 4 months prior to my 10-year anniversary there because
oh
I was like, oh,
god,
I just want to make it to a decade. And because like,
oh
there was a while where it was just like we were on like kind of like edge for like the longest time after
yeah,
2019 when we had our first wave of layoffs. And it's like, oh, how much longer are we going to last? And we lasted 5 more years, but still it
yeah,
was like, it is difficult to have that level of tenure, and loyalty just doesn't exist either from the employee or employer at this point.
exactly,
But it is very heartening to see a lot of the long tenured folks, especially these Japanese companies like
yeah,
Nintendo, Square Enix. We're going to talk about another one here in a second. But yeah, it's just it's not something that you typically see over in the West. Like
yeah.
to see somebody who's been at a company for 20 years even is a rarity in the
Mhm.
US. Like, I mean, how long has Todd Howard been at Bethesda?
Yeah.
Like that, let's see, Todd Howard. He has been at Bethesda since 1994, so 30
Oh, wow.
years. That is quite the accomplishment there. But yeah, he has he's a rarity. You see a lot of
Yeah.
people be in these studio roles, but like I feel like especially with how things have been at like in this industry, it's
Yeah.
so hard to have that level. And I appreciate when folks do have that level of tenure, and hopefully they were treated right, because
Yes.
that's what I'm always hearing when it comes to like people wanting like better salaries or something. It's like, oh yeah, well, loyalty
Mhm.
doesn't pay. It's like when you go to a new company, that's when you see that leap forward. So
Exactly.
I'm hoping that these companies take care of all these folks that are at that show this level of loyalty, that they give almost their entire career to it.
Yeah. It's yeah, and I think it's something that because I've been through a layoff myself,
Hmm.
still kind of recovering from it, because that's what happens when you are laid off. I don't think anybody understands that like it is not just like the trauma of the moment, but like how you deal with it financially after is your next job actually peeling into it. And yeah, all I can say is Japanese law helps keep people in good places, or what we hope are good places. Um, and yeah, I think as I've gotten older and as I've been in recruiting and hiring longer, the more I have been a larger advocate of pushing federal legislation that allows us to have that same type of ability. That way, when you're leaving, it's a choice, right? Because I mean, you could say, like, oh, well, if you're leaving for better pay, like you're choosing to leave for better pay. But at the end of the day, if your job is not able to accommodate the rise in cost of living and all those pieces, um, you are forced into leaving. Yeah, this isn't a job podcast. You just happen to have a recruiter on this podcast. That was the first place my brain went to.
And I just happen to have just been laid off about a month ago, so it's also top of mind for me. So
Yeah.
I'm here for it as well. But yeah, so we wish Stefan all the best in his future endeavors.
Yes.
35 years at Nintendo. Wow, what a career!
That's
And
older than me. Just by
not
a couple years, to be fair. I'm not a baby, but that is older than me.
not older than me, unfortunately. But speaking of folks leaving companies after 3 decades, we saw last weekend that Hideaki Itsuno announced he was leaving Capcom after 30 years. He shared a message on his Twitter account saying, At the end of August 2024, I will be leaving Capcom after 30 years and 5 months. Thank you for your long-term support of the games and characters I have been responsible for. I hope you will continue to support Capcom's games and characters. From September, I will start developing a new game in a new environment. I hope to create fun, beautiful games that are as memorable as, or even more memorable than the ones I have created so far. Please stay tuned for my next creation. So Itsuno, I don't know if you've looked at his resume, but he has a pretty solid list of games that he has worked on. So over the last 30 and a half years, his directing duties alone have been Rival Schools, Power Stone 1 and 2, Darkstalkers Chronicle, Capcom vs. SNK 2, Dragon's Dogma 1 and 2, Devil May Cry 2, 3, 4, and 5, plus the supervising director on DMC, and he was also the planner of Street Fighter Alpha.
Wow.
So not a bad resume at all.
No, not at all. I mean, and I think too, like one of the really cool things is looking at the diversity of genre underneath that resume as well, right? So it's like not even just like formative games, but like games in like completely different spaces. That's so cool.
Yeah, and you know, he had this was such a roller coaster. I put this point out on my Twitter where I was like, man, we finally got signs of life for the Power Stone franchise at that Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase. Yeah. And I was like, maybe there's hope for the future. And then the man responsible for the franchise leaves the company literally that weekend. And I'm like, come on. I've been waiting
out for the Power Stone fans.
Been waiting for 25 years for new Power Stone news, and we finally got it. And then like the dude's like just peacing out. So but I wish him all the best. And hopefully, I mean, who knows? Maybe he's going to make like a spiritual successor to a Power Stone game at whatever he's doing next. But you know, there's also another Capcom luminary that's still a free agent. Maybe you could team up with him. It's another Devil May Cry alumni,
right.
Hideaki Kamiya. So maybe, but yeah, it's exciting to see where he ends up. So I know Shinji Mikami, speaking of the guy that directed PN09 or PN03, he just got scooped up to work on something. I saw that he joined something a few months back, studio that I think he's working with NetEase, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, unfortunately he got scooped up, but another Capcom legend is out there that he could team up with. But I know Itsuno expressed creating something along the lines of like an homage to Street Fighter's classic games, but that was
really
before he left Capcom. So, I mean, is there anything that comes to mind that you'd like to see him tackle with that resume?
God, I genuinely don't know. I think one of the things that I'd like to see, whatever he goes into, whatever his creative endeavor is I, one, hope it feeds his soul, and two, I hope it's something that is different from what we have. It's really weird because in games, I always want more of my favorite franchise. I do. I really, really do. But I think right now we are in a dearth of new things being created and given chances. Mm-hmm. And I think that for the future, and anybody on his team that would be working under him, any of his juniors, seeing something new come to life would probably just be the most exciting thing for me. That's the only way we can keep opening the industry up, is to keep doing new things. And yeah, as much as I would like him to do something to get scooped up, work on a project that I really love, I do think that, yeah, I just hope it's new and exciting both for players and for him.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want something interesting and new, and the ability to, you know, give him that creative freedom that maybe he wasn't feeling at Capcom.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
you know,
I would say a new fighter. Like, make a new fighter that's going to rival the existing, like, foundation. Because, like, I feel like when it comes to fighting games, you just have, like, the ones that have always been here, and it is extremely hard to, I don't want to say like usurp the power from it, but like find the player base that pushes a new game further. Like that's a really big hill to climb up. So if you were just to like spend the next 4 years making a brand new fighting game, and then it comes out and it's all over Evo and like the landscape has shifted, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it's very rare that a non-major franchise, like it's always like the Street Fighters, the Mortal Kombats. I mean, we get like Dragon Ball Fighters kind of broke out, but you know, that's obviously a very established IP.
Exactly.
what's the last one that really broke through? Was it like
I guess Guilty
Guilty
Gear.
Gear?
Guilty Gear is the only thing that I could think of.
I mean, Skullgirls was pretty big for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's rarer and rarer that like a non. I mean, I guess we could just say Capcom because they have the Marvel versus Capcom and Capcom
Yep.
versus SNK and all those games, Darkstalkers. But yeah, if it's not Capcom, it's not Mortal Kombat, it's not Smash
Tekken.
Brothers, Tekken. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see what this guy's up to next, but it's probably going to be a while before we hear about it if he's just
Oh
starting like this week.
yeah.
But again, long tenured Japanese developers. While at Gamescom, Games Radar sat down with Takaya Imamura, who is the artist behind a lot of the character designs of Star Fox and F-Zero, and including the character design for Captain Falcon. And he was at Nintendo for 32 years before leaving in 2021 to become an indie developer. And he's currently working on a game adaptation of the Omega 6 manga. But in this
What?
interview, yeah, and apparently it's like kind of like stylized graphics and everything. But in this interview they got onto the topic of working with Shigeru Miyamoto for such a long time, and I guess they asked him like what is he most proud of in his career, and he said that he was most proud of having worked under Shigeru Miyamoto for as long as he did. And here's what his quote said. He said, quote, "Generally speaking, he's a really kind, hardworking person, but when it comes to game design, he does not accept compromise. So my impression was this is what it takes to be number one at anything in the world." I
Wow.
mean, that's the mentality, like that mentality of like not accepting compromise and doing whatever it takes to be best in the world. That almost reminds me of like when you watch these documentaries about like, the 95 Bulls and like see
Yes.
Michael Jordan, like The Last Dance, or you see like
Hmm.
the Redeem Team and they're talking about Kobe's mentality. And it's like, that's kind of like the way I would describe it is like, yeah, they just don't
Yeah.
compromise. They just do whatever it takes to be the best in the world. And I mean, it's probably safe to say that Miyamoto is our goat. So like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's just funny to hear like those kind of parallels of how I view like Miyamoto and how they describe him.
Yeah. It makes me excited because I feel like because I think I think The Last Dance is like the perfect example. It was funny because I just remember like when that came out, a lot of people were, I would say, angry about Jordan and how he acted and saw the world. But then you actually do get to like peel that back and see it. And I think anybody who's been an athlete, anybody who has loved somebody so much that they were going to get it across the finish line, even if they had to crawl and bite and scrape their way across it, that is a certain mentality. And I think to hear it praised in that way, it makes me really happy because that's like, I don't know. I saw Jordan. I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. That's why nobody's ever gonna be greater than him.
Yeah. And I love that, like, you hear all these stories about Shigeru Miyamoto and, like, the upending the tea table is like the famous
Yeah,
line about, like, he'll come in, the developers will be like a year in on something and he'll just look at it and be like, this isn't working. And basically, like, just be like, nope, this entire thing is just cut from the game, even though you've been working on it for so long.
yeah,
And he's also, there's been all these stories and talking with Eiji Aonuma about like, he's making something on the Zelda franchise, or talking with Takashi Tezuka about working on the Mario franchise. And they're just like,
yeah,
yeah, working with him, like I, he'll, it seems like Miyamoto knows exactly when to like, just like do the upending of the tea table, and other times where he could just push back and see how much he really the developer really believes in this thing
exactly.
before he lets them go forward with it. Because there's so many examples of like, you know, Eiji Aonuma's like, no, I really want to advocate for this, and Miyamoto's like, okay, yeah, go for it. Let's see how it works out. And
Yeah.
then I think the was it the cartoon style of Wind Waker that
Yes.
Miyamoto was not a fan of. I don't think he liked the design of Link, if I'm not mistaken, but Eiji Aonuma was
Yeah.
like adamant about it, or maybe it was the other way around. I don't know. But it's just interesting that he has like this no compromise thing, but he will not like just be like tyrannical with it, right? Like
Yeah,
he
and that's like the important thing. Like I think it's one of those recognizing where where other people will not compromise either, respecting it and pushing forward. And I think that's the important thing, especially because you're working with other people when you make games. A lot of other people
Mhm,
when you're making games.
absolutely. So I just thought that was a fun little quote to, kind of get some insight. There was I've had a chance to be in the same room as Shigeru Miyamoto a few times. I interviewed him and Koji Kondo together, which was fantastic. But like, I've always seen him as like this joyful man, and like he's extremely like, friendly and accommodating, and like he's always given me extra time whenever I've had a chance to talk to him.
Aw.
And he, I always describe him as like the man you would want to have created Mario. Like he's just like, he gives off those vibes.
Yeah.
But our former Game Informer features editor, I mean, this is like literally 9.5 years ago that he left Game Informer. He wrote a feature one time about how he saw the other side of Miyamoto, which is rare that comes out in like the public. But it was after the Skyward Sword demo that went wrong at E3, and
Oh.
Matt Helgeson, our former features editor at Game Informer, he happened to see Miyamoto walking out with his entourage, and he was not happy with how that demo went. And he was like,
Yeah.
really like passionately speaking to, I guess, his handlers or whoever it was that he was with. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you see him and he gives off this amazing, like, super jovial persona, but like, he's also like, probably got that, like, for lack of a better term, like killer instinct in him about like, making sure everything is working, making sure everything is perfect for everything. And if it doesn't, then I'm sure he's going to be very adamant about fixing it.
Yeah, and there's almost like an understanding too. I think to be that good at anything, to be that creative at anything, it's also understanding that everything that you create becomes your life's work. The next one becomes your life's work, because you don't know if you're going to make another, thing afterwards. And that type of passion also means that you have to be reflexive and okay to changing things, and like kind of like you said, like upending the tea table if you just know something is not working. And like how you respond to that moment. Yeah.
I mean,
It's
it's an incredible situation to have worked under Shigeru Miyamoto for 32 years. That's just a wild thing. But
again, with tenure, like that is, and specifically under one person as well. So,
and I mean, to work on like the character designs of such iconic characters now, like, the Star Fox team and Captain Falcon, which has become such a bigger part of Nintendo outside of F-Zero. Most people probably know him as the Smash Brothers character than the F-Zero character at this point.
That would be I am that person.
But let's end the news segment on a speculative note. I spotted this on Wario64's Twitter account just before we hopped into this recording. He recognized that the official Tony Hawk's Pro Skater social media accounts have updated their header image to be a special 25th anniversary header image. So the last game we got in the series was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2, which was a remake of those first two games. Freaking phenomenal. It was an incredible remake package. I was very skeptical, and then I reviewed it for Game Informer, and I was like, this is incredible. It's exactly what I wanted. And there was that 2022 report that Activision canceled remakes of 3 and 4 so that the studio could be folded into the Call of Duty machine, which is very unfortunate because 3 and 4 would have been amazing if they were able to remake those as well. Hopefully they've rethought some of that, and we're going to get something, at least those two remakes soon because of this 25th anniversary celebration, but it could be nothing. But what do you think this means?
I hope that it is 3 and 4. I hope that it is something. I think the Tony Hawk franchise, it's funny. Like, we joke all the time, me and my husband, that our music taste is just Tony Hawk playlists. It is, then that's it. I want it. I want it so bad. Also, Pro Skater 4 was like that was my favorite of the series overall. And so when it was announced that they may have scrapped it, that was when I got real sad because that was the one I was waiting for. Because I do think that, like, as far as remakes go, I think Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 is like, I think that it's a perfect game. Like, I think we actually gave it a 10, which was funny because and people listening may not know this, but my husband and I work together at our site, and he reviews games as well, but he doesn't believe in giving things tens, like very specifically, because he's our games editor. He'll be like, why are you giving it this? Does it set a new standard? And just run people through it. And I remember for 2 days before embargo, he was just pacing, and I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, I want to give it a 10. And I don't remember if he settled on a 9.5 just to keep his no tens policy alive, but it was a large discussion, and I just hope it's something. I think that Tony Hawk is one of those franchises and games that everybody can tie themselves back to in a way that it deserves something. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's something. I hope it's something.
Yeah, I really hope it is something, even if it's just those remakes of 3 and 4. Like, it doesn't have to be an all new game,
Yeah.
but or even just a collection. You just up-res them. It doesn't need to be like the full remakes, like 3, 4, and then maybe the underground games. Like, I'd be about that.
Yeah, the underground games are good. The underground games are
The first one in
really
particular.
good. Yes, first one was very good.
The second one was a little weird, but
yeah, and
it's still
leave
fun.
American Wasteland to the side. Just forget that happened.
I will vouch for Project 8. I thought that was a fun one. But
Project
maybe
8 was, yeah, Project 8 was fine.
It was also very gimmicky though, so maybe that was just like the novelty of the moment. But yeah, hopefully it's something. I gave Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 a 8.75, which ended up being on the lower end. But yeah, I had to look it up on Wikipedia because our site no longer exists. Fun times. But we are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we will get some all-new hands-on impressions for The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom and a couple of other games. We will be right back. We are back, and this past weekend, PAX West took place out in Seattle, Washington, and as part of that, Nintendo was giving first hands-on for 2 of its most anticipated upcoming games. We're going to be talking all about those, as well as a couple of third-party titles that I'm very excited for. But Kate, first, how was the overall PAX experience this year?
It was hard. Really? I think because I've been doing PAX for 6 years at this point, I can see it getting smaller. So the experience was great. The games I got to play were great. Fewer in number than previous years and much smaller than previous years. And I think I didn't feel it so much last year because Nintendo made a little mini Nintendo land at the top. So it let you feel that there was still a lot of space there. And I remember when PAX West was PAX Prime and it took up 3 floors and a whole other building was just the LAN area. And I think every year it's lost more and more. And I don't know, it's sad. The games were great though. I know that was like a sad answer to it, but it's just kind of like, it's been a staple in my convention rotation, and it's much cheaper than going to Gamescom or Tokyo Game Show. And so it's just one of those, I want to see it thrive, but it seems as if it's getting eaten by those other 2.
I wanted to go this year so bad. I love going to PAXs because, so many of my favorite people go out there, yourself included. And it's sad that I didn't get to go this year. I just couldn't justify it. I was like, look, I'm going to go to one, granted, if I don't get a job, I'm going to go to one games industry thing for the rest of the year. And that's probably going to be the Game Awards. And, it's really, I got the serious FOMO, but also like, I feel like last year it felt bigger, and I think a lot of that was attributable to Nintendo Live, which did not happen this year.
Yep.
So
did not.
I guess they did one in Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Like, because I saw there was like Charles Martinet was out there and doing stuff as his new role of Mario ambassador or whatever it is that he is. But yeah, like, I don't know. It's still like, even though it's smaller, it's still spread out across those 2 convention centers, right?
It is, yeah. They did something smart this year where they put all of the tabletop into Summit, and Summit is the brand new one. Art, if you've ever gone to PAX West, that is the traditional convention center. And so what they did was they split the video games and the tabletop games, which I do think was really smart, especially for those crowds to be able to kind of have their own space and be able to fill the floor with what means something to them. That being said, it just made it no I guess it made the less crowds noticeable. I think that if they were to pull everything into the new summit building, it would feel bigger, it would feel livelier, and we would all have better reception, so we could actually text our PR people to find out where the booth is and get to our appointments on time.
Yeah, I mean that was the hardest thing for me last year was like, all right, what building is this appointment in? And
Mhm.
there were a couple of times I definitely went the wrong way, but
Yep.
and especially since it's not the easiest to get in because you have to like, do you still have to like get funneled through like that bus tunnel in order to
Yep.
get to, was it Summit that you have to get into that
Yep.
way?
Yep. You can get in through like the front piece, but even then, like it feels like a convention hall that wasn't built for convention movement, I think. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I had a great time. I played a lot of games, and I played games that I did not know were going to hit with me. One we're going to talk about, actually two we're going to talk about today. So that's always exciting, is finding out that, oh, I do like this. I do like this genre.
Well, let's not keep the audience in suspense any longer, and we're not going to bury the lead here because we have a few games we're going to talk about. Some of them you've gotten your hands on. Some of them are just we just got some new trailers, but these are all going to be big name titles that are coming to Switch. And the biggest one that I can think of on the immediate horizon, The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. So I think a lot of people are most curious about this game. But before we jump into your hands-on impressions, because you did touch some Joy-Cons while this game was on the screen, we got a new trailer right before I finished recording last week's episode. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We got a video of about just over 5 minutes giving us a tour of the Still World, which is a new, I
Mhm.
guess, alternate dimension that features a world that's like ripped apart, and then you use Tri, which is Zelda's companion on this game, and she can open passageways through the rifts that and there's like this purple rifts basically that you saw Link get sucked into in the announcement trailer, and then we see the King of Hyrule get sucked into in this trailer, and this lets her go to the Still World, and like all of like the land masses are like ripped apart, so like you can't just jump over to a lot of them, so you actually have to get creative with Zelda's echoes to open up paths. So there's one segment where we see Zelda like lay out like boxes, and she jumps up on top of them, and then she jumps up on a tree, and then she lays a bed across the tree so she can run off on that and jump across to the other landmass. So it seems like there's going to be some fun like
Yeah.
puzzle-esque platforming here. And the trailer says that it has, quote, massive dungeons in the Still World. And I know a lot of people, they miss the traditional Zelda dungeons in the wake of games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Mhm.
So probably a lot of people are going to be excited about that. We also got a glimpse at a boss fight against a monster made of rocks, and Zelda was using different echo strategies. So like they're like, oh yeah, you don't have to like approach the bosses the same every time.
Mhm.
So like one of it was like she just spawned like a bunch of snakes, and they all like bum rushed like the boss's weak spot. Another time like she got to like fight alongside the echo, so like she spawned like some sort of like bokoblin or something, and it was throwing spears at him, and she was able to pick up rocks and throw at it as well, so like you can gang up on it. And then there was another one where she just like spawned some echoes, and then she also spawned a bed, and she just laid down and let the echoes do the work, which is very cute. But then we got the moment we've all been waiting for, sword fighter form. Everybody's like, oh, I want to play
Mhm.
as a sword fighter, and it's basically you take the form of it looks like Zelda cosplaying as Link almost, but also
Yeah.
glowing blue. But in this form, she can still use her echoes, and she uses moves similar to Link. So she's able to swipe at enemies with her sword. Unfortunately, she can only stay in this form for a short time, but you can find more energy for the form in the Still World. So by exploration, you can replenish your sword fighter form bar. So that's fun. Hopefully, encourage a little exploration there if you want it. Uh, we saw Dompe, who's typically like the graveyard keeper in like games like Ocarina of Time. He's a mechanic in this game. You can buy gadgets for use in the world. So they showed like there's one that's like a spider robot that you can throw and it'll explode, and there's other gadgets that you can get. Like there was one that had that was shooting like cannonballs out, and you just hold it up, so it's like you have like a little like projectile weapon. And then before the trailer wrapped up, we got a teaser of what looks like Link being possessed by something. His eyes are glowing red, and he leaps at Zelda like he's going to attack her. So I'm assuming that will be a boss fight. It also seems like maybe they shouldn't have spoiled that, but
Yeah, I will say I'm not going to spoil what happens in it because we did get to go through that fight. I think that is going to be best experienced when you go into that moment.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming what you played at PAX West was not the still world stuff, or was it?
It was.
It was.
It was
Okay.
both. So essentially, we had about, I think the demo was supposed to take about 80 minutes. We went through it, and I say we because it was me and the two people that I was at PAX with, my writer Eddie de Santiago and
Oh, I love Eddie.
Matt, who he's fantastic. So shout out Eddie and shout out Matt. So we played together, and I guess we played the entirety of what that 5-minute trailer is without any of the skipping. So we got to see some dungeons that were just around in like general Hyrule, and then we ended up in the still world. We went through the beginning, then they kind of pushed us into the still world by loading another save, and we went through 2 boss fights, and it was really, really fun because we got the first one, we were working with the limited echoes because it happens like pretty much at the start of the game. And then in the second piece, we had a lot more echoes. And I think one of the things for me, and this is where I kind of out myself here, I've never beat a Zelda game. I've barely played Zelda games, and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are just way too overwhelming for me, especially because I already like Final Fantasy 14 eats up all of my extra time.
I get
So
that.
I tend not to jump into games like that. But what was really fantastic about Echoes of Wisdom was that there was a simplicity, and I know that those other games have like it is simple, but with using the physics mechanics you can make large big things. But here it's like, can I stack these 5 beds to make a bridge? And there is just something that may look gimmicky, but in practice, it's like this idea of using creative limited resources to push something forward, and you can't really do much more than stack them, move them, and that's it. And and the physics of it is really about height and what the object does. You can get some trampolines, you can get trees and use trees to kind of create a staircase. And I think it really scratches the itch for me of creative problem solving that I think is what makes me fall in love with platformers. But understanding the fact that I am going to have I'm going to have the same experience as somebody by having a very different experience on how we solved each of the puzzles. Because I was like, when Eddie had it, he was playing and he was like stacking beds. And I was like, why are you stacking beds? Just put a box. And it was, and I think that sort of creativity, that player agency, the idea that you are actively solving the problems in this world. Oh, it felt so good. And I'm sure that there's somebody just like yelling in their car as they listen to this, but Tears of the Kingdom had this or whatever. But I think the cute little toy art style also just does it for me because it's the simplicity. And I think if you're able to put forward creativity through simplicity, that takes a enormous amount of skill, an enormous amount of problem solving on the dev end to see what can happen. So yeah, I had a really good time. I'm gonna pick it up for sure. Yeah, it's great. And we play Zelda. She's so cute. Like
So I'm thinking of like which game might be best for you because Zelda's my favorite franchise. And if you like this style, I mean, Tears of the Kingdom, if you like the creative problem solving, Tears of the Kingdom is as creative as it gets in terms of like figuring out how to piece things together and like what effects they might have, and you know how to like get to the top of something using just the materials at like your disposal. For this gameplay style though, I wonder if like just firing up your Nintendo Switch Online and playing A Link to the Past on the SNES.
Ooh, okay.
I mean,
This intrigues me because everybody just told me, "Oh, we'll go play Link's Awakening," and I was like, "Ooh,
well, the
okay."
Link's Awakening remake that came out on
Hmm.
Switch in 2019, I think it was, that has the same art style. So if you like the art
Hmm.
style a lot, then maybe Link's Awakening is the way to go. It's also a more straightforward game in terms of like
Hmm.
like not straightforward in the sense of like it's easy or anything, but it's shorter
Hmm.
and it's weirder. I will say that. A
Okay.
Link to the Past is more straightforward in that it is like the blueprint for all future traditional Zelda games. And I would argue it's one of the most perfectly created video games of all time. Like for what
Okay.
it is a 10 out of 10 by all measures. And you know, the art style, the music, the gameplay, it's all fantastic. And it really was like after the original Legend of Zelda was like, okay, this is like the proof of concept for this franchise. A
Yeah.
Link to the Past was like establishing all the different core tenets that we now know in the Zelda franchise. So
Okay.
that would be
I'm
my
excited.
recommendation. But I would also
Okay.
say if this is your first time playing like a Zelda game from start to finish, use all the tools that you have at your disposal in 2024. So use the save states, or like if there's a couple scenes where I would just say like, you know, if you fall off and like you have to reclimb this tower because the boss knocked you off,
Yeah.
just use the Nintendo Switch Online rewind function and until you're not like falling off. So because
Okay.
there's one sequence in particular where you're climbing this tower and you get to the top and you have to fight this boss, and the boss is specifically designed to knock you off the platform, and if you fall you have to climb back up a few floors, and it is a giant pain. And if that happens, just rewind, use the Switch rewind function. And also, like, if you don't know where to go, don't hesitate to look up a guide. Like those would be my recommendations. As you are like, don't let people gatekeep you into being like, oh well, you didn't play the real version of A Link to the. No, just have fun with it. That I say that the best way to play a video game is the way that lets you have the most fun. As long as you're
Yeah.
not like hurting other people in terms of like, oh well, you're like hacking the game and like cheating on like, you know, online play or something like that. Like
Yeah.
you're playing a single player game, play it however you want. Like whether that is like firing it up on the original SNES and like playing like the purest run possible, throwing a Game Genie in there, or you know, whatever you want to do on Nintendo Switch Online, use save states. I don't care. Have fun. And that's the way I would recommend you do it. Like if you feel like you need to rewind, go for it.
That makes me really happy. And you know, that may make me actually just go pick up this Zelda game. Genuinely. So I thank you for not even just encouraging, but just throwing the gates open to Zelda, because it's been intimidating, man. Like people are feel a certain way about
I mean, again, A Link to the Past is an SNES game, so there are definitely things where it's like, okay, well, we've learned from these design conventions since you know the game
Mhm.
is over 30 years old now, but it's still an all-time classic for a reason.
Yeah.
If you want something a
Awesome.
little bit more modern, then yeah, like try to dust off your 3DS and play A Link Between Worlds, which is just like a more modern version of A Link to the Past.
Mhm.
Obviously, the sequel, so but like it follows like the same like style and like it uses the same world, but it also looks like taking it back to Echoes of Wisdom. Echoes of Wisdom looks like it might be a sequel to those two games as well. So, A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, and then Echoes of Wisdom might be a trilogy in terms of because
Oh.
several times when they've shown the map of Hyrule, it looks like the version of Hyrule from those two games.
Huh.
So it might
I
make sense
wish
to play it.
I wish I could provide you information. The one thing I will say is the other thing that really blew me away was they did pull up the map for us several times. It's enormous. There are going to be so many dungeons and so much to do.
Mm.
And I think there is also what makes me excited about this is each dungeon kind of felt like it gave its own like little burst of serotonin once you completed it, whether it was just to get an echo, or to do like the story components, which the ones in the still worlds were for. And I think that that's going to it's going to be a fantastic gameplay loop, I think, because
I
I
can't
was
wait.
already invested
Oh
just from what
man.
we got to do and see.
I can't believe we're in the month where we're getting a new Zelda game. Like this is like for Nintendo fans, this is Christmas. This is not
Yeah,
like Christmas is coming 2 months early or 3 months early. This is wild. Yeah, I'm so stoked for this. It comes out September 26th, and that 5+ minute trailer is available on YouTube if you want to check that out. It's also playing in segments over the top of the video version of this podcast. So yeah, I watching that trailer, I was just like, oh my god, give me this game now! Can't wait. September 26th cannot come fast enough. We got a few other trailers. This first one you did not get your hands on, as far as I know. It is Mario and Luigi Brothership, and this is the revival of the long-running RPG series. It seemed like it was dead in the water. We were just getting like remakes and re-releases of this series, but now we're getting an all-new entry, and this was much less in depth. Like I said, the other one was 5+ minutes. This one only lasted about 30 seconds, and it highlights Concordia, which is the area where the game takes place. And it's just really just like a video tour, basically giving us like several different biomes as well as more looks at the, I don't know, pretty striking art style and fun animations that this game has. I think this one looks pretty enjoyable, and I've never played a Mario and Luigi game before. Have you?
I haven't. I haven't. Again, well, no, I actually haven't.
Well, I haven't either. Um, have you played any of the Mario RPGs, like the
I
like Super Mario
have.
RPG or okay?
Yes, so I have played Super Mario RPG. That is a game I have played.
Okay. Well, I mean, this one is like the spiritual successor to those. This and the Paper Mario games are pretty much spawning off of the Super Mario RPG game, that the first one that came out on SNES and then was
Mhm.
remade last year. But this one comes out November 7th, so we're not too far off from this one either. So we got one more trailer here, and it's another short one, but it had some actual news behind it. Pauline joining the Mario Party roster in Super Mario Party Jamboree. We also got to look at some of the new mini games, including a giant arm wrestling match where it looked like Pauline and Ninji were mashing buttons to win an arm wrestling match against Mario and Donkey Kong. There was an asymmetrical one where you're piloting a punching robot that's trying to take out the other enemies or the other characters, and they're trying to escape. And then it looks like a game show where they're all lined up and they have to stop a slot machine on a particular symbol. And they honestly look like a lot of fun. I was not the biggest fan of the original Super Mario Party. I thought, I mean, I thought it was fine. It was a solid entry. Mario Party Superstars is my favorite one on the Switch, but that's just a greatest hits compilation. But I just hope that they learn to not rely too heavily on the sideways Joy-Con that they did
Yeah.
on the first Super Mario Party. But you know, it's a game that I'm looking forward to. I'm really hopeful for this one. I feel like they're finally like finding their stride again with this franchise. I don't know if you played the Wii U versions, but they felt lost in the Wii U era.
Yeah. I think like Super Mario Party is this game, like it is the monopoly of like multiplayer party game experiences. Like you're there to ruin friendships. And it is like in general, the chaos and joy that comes from those games, I think is something that is unmatched, I would say, when it comes to party games, and I don't know why. I played the first one for charity. I don't remember which one I played, but I played my first time playing a Mario Party. Was I guess a modern Mario Party. I wouldn't call the Wii ones; those were just kind of there. A modern Mario Party, because I had actually just bounced on it from the Wii. Was for a charity stream, and we played for like a solid 4 hours, and I just realized how good like the series can be, but more specifically how your investment with the people around you can help that in the same way that other games like Mario Kart are able to do. So I'm excited for what's coming up with Jamboree.
Yeah, it looks great. I think the trailer really made me feel like this is going to be a good entry. But yeah, it's coming out October 17th on Switch. So again, we are coming up on all these games at a rapid rate. There is a game that you got your hands on that I guess two games you got your hands on that are third party developers. I'm very excited for both of these. They're both Apple Arcade titles that I've wanted to play, but I'm like, I'll just wait for them to come to console because there is like this kind of specific path that these games seem to take. We've seen it recently with TMNT Splintered Fate. We saw it with Grindstone before that, where they have a couple years or maybe 1 year of exclusivity on Apple Arcade, and then they come to other platforms.
Yep.
The one that I am most excited for is Fantasian Neo Dimension. This is the new game, or I guess newest game from the creator of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, and also the composer Nobuo Uematsu. And I started it on Apple Arcade. It came to Apple Arcade in 2021. I started it and I played, the first couple of hours, and I had a blast with it. But you got your hands on the Switch version at PAX West. How are you feeling about this one?
Oh God, it was I. Look, I'm not a turn-based combat girly. I find it grindy. The way that random encounters will just totally ruin the flow of my exploration. It has been very hard for me to get into the genre in general of turn-based RPGs, and I was expecting more of the same when I picked that up and loaded the save file. Oh my God, it was not that. I am so excited. I am so excited to play the full version of this game because, very specifically, and I think what defines this is the fact that they have, it's called, and I need to get this portmanteau so I can say it correctly, dimension. So like a portmanteau of dimension and dungeon. It's called the dimension system. You can enter dimension battles, and in those dimension battles, what you do is you actually fight all of the random encounter mobs that have been going into it while you have been like adventuring. And that is really cool to me because you one have to fight them in the wild first, you have to beat them, and then they're able to just be put in there. And you can enter a dimension battle at 5, 10, 15, or you can let it build up and do all 30 at once. And it's such a cool system in that it adds a different level of strategy that takes advantage of the game's combat system, which deals with trajectories,
Mm-hmm.
and certain powers can move certain ways. And it is just a very fulfilling fight experience that kind of makes all of those little random encounters actually mean something. And I know that I'm probably in the minority that thinks random encounters are annoying, but
I don't
they're
think you
annoying.
are. I think a lot of
Okay.
people, especially today, think
Yay.
they're random. I
Okay.
mean, look at Final Fantasy and Persona and even Metaphor. They are adding the characters out in the world, so you see them and you can know, like, I can either avoid them or like
Yeah.
sneak up on them to make this battle easier. I think that random encounters in 2024, I think there's been a shift.
Okay. Yay. I feel happy then. Um,
Validation.
validation. And the cool thing is you get this added level of difficulty if you go in with 30 if you go into one with 30 enemies, but it doesn't kind of leave you out to dry as well. You do get things like they're called dimension gimmicks, and if you hit them while you're attacking, you can get different buffs, shields. You can get an extra turn, and learning how to use those and make sure that you're hitting them also affects how you play. So it was a really fun experience. I could see entirely as well why this was a mobile title first. And when I was playing it on the Switch, there is a lot. I don't want to say the realization because I've known this for a while, but like the ways that mobile games have grown over time into these really, I would argue, like comprehensive examples of their genres
Hmm.
is really exciting. I will say, because the background environments are actually handmade dioramas that they then put 3D characters on, it is beautiful. It can be kind of jarring at times. I don't know what that experience looks like if you're playing on your big TV on your console.
Oh,
That
were
would
you
be
playing
like
on
my
handheld?
only. I was playing on handheld. Yeah.
Oh, Interesting. I wonder
So
if that was
yeah.
a choice that they made because maybe I don't know how it looks. Like I've only played on my
So
iPhone.
so they did have two versions. They had PlayStation and they had handheld Switches. I
Oh.
specifically chose the handheld because when I at another demo I did at Summer Game Fest, the space in the hotel didn't allow you to be far enough away from the big TVs, and I actually get vertigo and migraines depending
Hmm.
on the types of movements. And there was a specific game on there that's animation had done that to me in the past, so I opted to play on the Nintendo Switch. I think that handheld may be the best way for this game still, but I don't think that that detracts from the fact that I do think this game deserves a wide audience, and I'm extremely excited to play the full version whenever that's available.
Yeah, well, it's coming to Switch, PlayStation, and PC Q4 of this year. So that is one that I've been waiting to come to consoles for a long time, just like TMNT Splintered Fate, which came a couple months ago. So happy to see all these Apple Arcade
Oh,
games
it's also
coming.
coming to Xbox.
It
Don't forget
is. I
that.
thought it was
Hmm.
only Switch, PlayStation. Okay, well,
Nope.
great. The bigger the audience, the better on this one. Another Apple Arcade game that you got your hands on. You're wearing the ears right now for the
I
video
am.
audience. Hello Kitty Island Adventure. So this one came to Apple Arcade last year. From my understanding, this is almost like an Animal Crossing esque game.
It is. Brian, let me tell you, I have been waiting for this moment. It feels like an eternity because I don't own Apple products. So I had to play Hello Kitty Island Adventure at my mother's house on her Apple TV
Oh my god.
whenever I got a chance. There, like, I have a save file and everything. But the Switch is the home of this game. Like, this is where it was always meant to be. It is like Animal Crossing, but at the same time, there are dungeons that you go through. There's platforming, there's puzzles, it is a layered landscape where you're moving through the clouds, you're moving through the on land, and then there is a sea component where you put on a little mermaid tail. Like, I am sad that I have to wait until 2025 to play it in its entirety, but I am so excited that this is where we ended up.
Hmm.
When it first came out on Apple Arcade, I had got the chance to talk to, um, I believe she was the creative director on the game from Sunblink, and we talked about the process of adapting characters that are both extremely beloved, I say with Hello Kitty ears on, um, as well as characters that don't have that much backstory outside of factoids that would come on their packaging. And I think what is very exciting is, as somebody who's been a lifelong Sanrio fan, being able to be in that world and interact with the different personalities that all of these characters have had, and I have known that they have had, or that I have given to them when I've seen them, it really means something. I think that there's a level of nostalgia, but I also think that the level of play to the game is both intuitive and inventive at the same time. And it had a beautiful life on the Apple Arcade. They got a number of expansions, a number of updates, and I think that right now, I think that year of exclusivity was a good thing for, I guess, 2 years of
Hmm.
exclusivity now, because when it does come to Switch, players are going to have such a comprehensive game on their hands. I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I mean, this is one that I've heard players rant and rave about. Like they said, like, oh, it's a Hello Kitty game, so like even if you're not like a Sanrio fan, this one is worth checking out
It
because
is.
like so many people they see like a license like Hello Kitty and they probably think like, oh well, they just slapped that on to get like the large fan base. It's probably not a good game, but I've heard this one is actually a lot of fun.
I will also say, I think the other thing, the main thing that it may have to fight against is, like, assuming what the age expectancy of the player is. And
Hmm.
I can tell you, those dungeons are hard. Like, it is, but it is also creative problem solving. It's maneuvering your environment, moving boxes, platforming. Like, it's going to be, if you are excited by Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and you wouldn't say that that game is for children, you should not say Hello Kitty Island Adventure is either. And I would say that there is there's like a Venn diagram of like a puzzle and dungeon exploration, and like I think there's a nice little overlap for me. So
Well, that's coming in 2025. And real quick before we take our final break of this episode, you also got your hands on Dragon Quest HD or Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake. It's a mouthful. I've already talked about my hands-on impressions on this show back in June or July, maybe, I don't know, one of those months. And I guess just like I think you got to play that same demo I did at Summer Game Fest, if I'm not mistaken.
I did, yeah.
What did this PAX West demo give you or teach you about this game that we did not already know?
And this was kind of like the piece that I was like interested about is I don't know if it gave me too much more.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it did give in terms, it gave you more story, I believe. Like, I think that that's what it showed you, the humor, that personality test that's there from, we got to go through the personality test at the very beginning, which was really nice. And then we also got to see the monster arena. So I think it just kind of solidified my thoughts on it. If I picked up this game, because I know Dragon Quest from the anime and the manga. That is particularly where I have been very invested in the franchise, not so much through the games, but it reaffirmed that this is the leap I want to take into it. And I think that that's very much what they are hoping with with the HD2D remake, is that they're going to be able to honor the original game but also bring in an entirely new audience.
Awesome. Well, I am looking forward to that as well. And I know that a lot of people who maybe didn't experience it back when it came out in the late 80s are looking forward to some modern way to experience this game. So that is coming out November 14th on Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, and PC. But Kate, we're going to take our final break of this episode. And when we return, we're going to be getting your eShop gem of the week. We'll be right back. We are back, and before we get out of here, I would be remiss if I didn't get an eShop Gem of the Week from my esteemed guest. So, Kate, as you may or may not know, the eShop Gem of the Week is a way for our guests to shout out a game that might not otherwise get the attention it deserves on this show. So, Kate, what is your eShop Gem of the Week?
My eShop gem of the week is Arco. It is published by Panic, and it is, look, if you like alpacas, you should play this
And
game.
who doesn't?
So Arco is a fantasy RPG. It is a mix of turn-based and real-based combat, which is why I think I really, really enjoyed it. It has that pixelated art style that I think is really beautifully executed when it comes to the landscapes that you're moving through. It is, and I think one of the other important pieces of it, and actually why I picked it up to play, is it's a Mesoamerican inspired fantasy world. And I think that right now, especially with Final Fantasy Dawn Trail and even Vessel of Hatred that is coming out for Diablo, we're in a age where people are looking to Mesoamerica. And if you're not sure what that entails, and when you're listening to this, that is looking at like Incan, Mayan, Aztec, like the indigenous tribes and the cultures that were around for thousands and like I literally thousands and thousands of years, as old as the ancient Egyptians. And what is beautiful about it is the complexity and vibrancy of those mythologies and of those worlds and environments are being honored in new ways in gaming that I am just very excited about. I am an indigenous Mexican, and I think there's so much to offer when we look to a past that isn't just something that has been either the fascination of many a European adventurer and or just medieval Europe itself. And I think that Arco is a game that has a beautiful art style, a fantastic soundtrack, and is well worth picking up. There are some issues on Switch. I think they've patched them out by now.
Mm.
If you sometimes moved a little too quickly. You could outpace the score, elements like that, but they are actively working on a patch, on patching the game to make it up to standard across all systems. But it's also the perfect handheld game, I think. Yeah, it's really great, and people should give it a chance and play it. Again, it's published by Panic. It is developed by Frantic, Max Cahill, Babiki, and Fayer. I think that it has a little bit of something for everyone in it. So
And it's such a pretty art style. And, I agree with you 100%. I'm glad that we're getting more and more stories from other cultures, other parts of the world than what we have traditionally seen. Like you said, like medieval European fantasy is such like a
mhm.
well-tread. And trust me, like I love stories from that too. Like The Witcher 3 is like
Yes.
one of my favorite games of all time. And I love exploring those worlds too, but like I love like the diversity of stories and cultures and worlds to explore. I picked up Arco. I've not had a chance to fire it up, unfortunately, because I've just been so busy with another game that we're going to talk about here in a second before we close out. But yeah, Arco is one of those games that like I've seen so much buzz for on Twitter, and they're like, "Hey, everybody in the know says that this is a game of the year. Like, it deserves to be
Yes.
in the conversation for like the best games of 2024."
Yep.
And it's $20 on Switch. I hope the Switch version has been patched because that's the version I picked up. But it's $20 on Switch. Came out just last month, and yeah, I can't wait to dive into this. Like you said, it uses simultaneous turn-based combat, which is a very interesting concept to me. And yeah, thank you so much for talking about it, because it's a game that I've been wanting to cover on this podcast, and I just have not had a
Yay.
chance to. So check that out if it's up, sounds up your alley. It's spelled ARCO, Arco. But I wanted to end the show. We usually end the show after the eShop gem, but I wanted to end on a rare non-Nintendo recommendation. I typically don't talk too much about games that don't appear on Switch, but I feel strongly enough about this recommendation that I think that it's worth talking about. And also, there's plenty of crossover here because it is Astro Bot, which is a PS5 exclusive title. And if you're a Patreon subscriber and at the $10 level, you heard me talk about it with GameSpot's Mark Delaney over on All Things Gamers. So if you want more of an in-depth discussion about this game, head on over to there. But I have loved my time with Astrobot so much. It reminds me of a 3D Mario game in like all the best ways. I don't know if you played Astro's Playroom.
I have not, because I don't
Oh
have
my
a
god.
PS5.
It's one of the
I
best.
desperately want to though. Like everything about this game, like I that it is none of the other exclusive PS5 games that make me want to pick it up. It is everything around this cute little Astro baby.
Oh my god, it is so well designed. Like I said, it reminds me of a 3D Mario game. Specifically, I would say Super Mario 3D World, because it has like the linear levels, but there's plenty of exploration and secrets to find. There are times where I was playing it where I was like, they may have out Nintendo'd Nintendo. Like it is just such a well crafted, well designed, well executed 3D platformer, and I cannot recommend it enough. And I think that people listening to this show, the only reason I'm bringing it up because it's obviously a PS5 exclusive, is because I think people who listen to this show and have a lot of love for 3D Mario games, which I think that is a pretty much just a circle. If you're talking about the Venn diagram, that is not like two circles intersecting. That is a circle. If you like this podcast, you probably like 3D Mario games. You should absolutely check it out. And it's available now, I guess, when this episode hits on PS5. And if you want to hear more of my thoughts on the game, I will be ranting and raving all about this title over on this week's All Things Gamers episode on Patreon. But yeah, Astrobot PS5, could not give it a higher recommendation. One of my favorite games of the year. Go check it out if you happen to have a PS5. But on that non-Nintendo note, Kate, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of All Things Nintendo.
Thank you so much for having me on. To be honest, I have always been very self-conscious about talking about Nintendo and Nintendo games because it is like such a large blind spot for me. But I feel at home talking about them here. So thank you so much for the invite. And everybody go play Arco. Go buy it.
And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get more All Things Nintendo content, you can join the Patreon paid tiers. And if you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at brian@allthingsnintendo.com. Hit me up on social media at Brian P. Shea, or join the community Discord, which is a perk for joining any of the paid tiers on Patreon. Also, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can search for All Things Nintendo or visit at Brian P. Shea on YouTube. Kate, get some of your plugs in.
You can find all of my work over at butwhytho.net. There were quite a few things at PAX that I am not able to talk about yet, and you will find all of that coverage on there, including maybe a little bit of some Nintendo-specific stuff. And I also review film. So if you like film, I'm actually about to head to a film festival at the end of September. So if you want to look at anything that's big in horror or action, I will be covering that pretty exclusively. And if you want to come bug me on Twitter, feel free at @ohmymythbrandbeer. And I'm also that on Instagram. I don't really do much there than like post a story of me on a plane, because I seem to do that a lot lately.
And maybe I'll see you on the other end of one of those plane trips in the very near future. But that is our show for this week. Thank you all again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time. Before we wrap up this episode, I just want to give a special shout out to the $10 patrons of the All Things Nintendo podcast: Aaron Smith, Elena R., Alex Stadnick, Andy Junkins, Ben Richland, Born Orpheus, Brooke Obscura, Chaps My Ass, Colton Bredlau, Derek Sigmund, Ian T. Clark, Jacob Nahin, Jason Thompson, Joar Hello, Jill Grote, Johnny Five, Jordan Sloat, Jose Villalobos, Joseph Jury, Justin Childress, Cody Gibson, Lindsay Hartz, Marshall Thompson, Megan S., Michael Anderson, Toad, Nintendo 101, Pat Roberts, Paul at Drunk on Mako, Pratable, Bobby Mac 265, Roger Reichart, Russell Sayer, Sarah McCarthy, Scott Matthews, Smithy Poo, Tux DC, Wham Bam Sam the Gaming Man, Zach Marcus, and Zachary Pliggy. Thanks to your support and that of the $5 patrons listed in the episode description, I'm able to continue doing this. Thank you so much for your support.